Yes, happy Pride, everyone. So yeah, so this is gonna be my first video back on YouTube after quite a long absence, and I've decided I'm gonna obviously take this channel down like a video essay type of route. Obviously, I'll improve over time as as I get more used to these video essays, and I get like a little bit more like tools at my disposal. But I just thought that for the first video I'll just have like a little bit of a yap session, because I mean, I'm back on like YouTube, so I might as well just make like a little bit of like of a yap session as like the first kind of video really. But yeah, and a video in regards to Pride, because obviously, you know, Pride is this month, so happy Pride to all my queer people, trans people, non-binary people out there. So yeah, I hope it's a great month for all of us as well. So I was just in terms of getting started, I just obviously wanted to speak about obviously the so yeah, I just wanted to obviously speak in regards to what's been happening obviously in the UK right now, and especially with how in the UK and in America and pretty much across the West, like how there's been like sort of an erasure of trans identity and non-binary identity, and how the governments are trying their best to pretty much genocide the whole of, you know, genocide trans people and non-binary people and people who don't conform to the you know, the cis patriarchal view of how gender is constructed. And it's really scary at the moment, and I just wanted to obviously just do a video just to like obviously kind of yap about it, and how colonialism actually plays like a pretty big like fucking factor in terms of how we've got to this point. Because pretty much the colonial kind of like white supremacist way and nature of how it you know, treats the trans and the gender non-conforming communities, it pretty much wants it to be obviously erased, because anything which doesn't, you know, in their view kind of, you know, fit what they perceive as to be the norm, it's seen to be like you know, as the other, and it seemed to be like as something that they want to obviously, you know, eradicate and you get rid of. So, and this has its ties and this has its roots in colonialism, with the sense of the fact that like in native indigenous tribes, there were obviously, you know, people identified as third spirits, which, you know, were people who, you know, if they didn't want to, if they didn't identify as either, you know, a male spirit or a woman spirit, they would normally identify as a third spirit, and the third spirit was considered to be something that was an amalgamation and a combination of both of them. And it was something that obviously you know, third spirits in native culture, I'm pretty sure still exists today, but it's something that that obviously white supremacist culture, when it colonized America, wanted to completely eradicate and get rid of these spirits, and wanted to get rid of what that represented, because to white supremacist culture, it absolutely just finds those that sort of expression of gender as to be absolutely abhorrent. It has to be either with the way how the culture goes, it has to either be, you know, identify as just, in their mind, the two identities of gender expression. And that's just fucking bullshit. You know, that is just genuinely just fucking bullshit. And I just thought that, like, you know, what with everything that's going on today, and how there's been, you know, trans people being genocided right now in the West, with how like the governments want to, you know, revoke the identity of trans people, and with the way how like you know, we're seeing right now in Palestine, you know, the Palestinian, you know, queers and trans people are currently being genocided by Israeli rockets and stuff like that. And obviously it all goes back to the idea of colonialism, and with the sense that that white settler colonialism obviously wants to get rid of those sort of like they want to get rid of, obviously, with the way how people want to identify us, because they don't want people to live obviously in a very freer expression way of life, pretty much. This is why, you know, they persecute obviously queer people and people are part of the lgtbqi plus community. They want to really like obviously like persecute them, because in the white supremacist colonial framework, they can't comprehend the fact that, you know, no one can follow their sort of like, you know, norm of how they represent society. And going back in terms of like the erasure of like trans people in regards to colonialism, obviously, you know, there's the Hijra community, obviously, of where I'm located in, obviously in the South Asian region, and the Hijra community is a very persecuted group that, you know, that the governments of the South Asian governments in, you know, India and Pakistan, especially in India, really want to like, you know, persecute them and really want to like absolutely just eradicate them like out of existence, especially right now with what we're seeing in India with the anti-trans law and anti-trans bill, which is very similar, just following off the same playbook of what is going on right now in the UK and America. And in the sense that these governments, especially the governments back there, obviously in the South Asian regions back there in India, are just following the same framework, because colonialism obviously happened, you know, in India, and colonialism has basically very much so corrupted the mindset of our regions, as we're just essentially just following the playbook and pretty much just following the mindset of our oppressors. And it's just like a fucking like madness out there, the fact that how they can just these governments will just follow what the oppressors are doing, when literally the Hijra community prior to colonialism existed for thousands of years in India. They even held like you know, like pretty prestigious rules in the court of, you know, in the Mughal Empire. And like, you know, so where are we going? What like, you know, where are we going with this? Just utter madness. And I guess like I guess what I'm getting at is that how did we actually end up getting here? Like, how did we end up getting to this stage where, you know, trans people right now are currently being and, you know, gender non-conforming and non-binary people in general are just generally getting treated like shit, and like, they're just generally getting treated like very badly, very abhorrently. And like, how did we end up getting here? And the reality is the fact that the governments will want to always persecute an outgroup, and in this current climate, unfortunately, at this current moment of time, that outgroup right now is trans people, people who are gender non-conforming, people who are non-binary. There's also other people like, you know, obviously like you know, like black people are getting persecuted, as it has been in Western society for such a long time. Muslims as well, and brown people in general. They will always want to persecute the outgroup, and in this instance, it's the trans people and people who are gender non-conforming, non-binary people, and people as a whole in the broader like queer spectrum. And it's even worse if you're a queer person or trans person or non-binary person of color, because if you're like if you're a person of color and you're in those groups, then you're like twice and like, you know, 4 times more to be persecuted. And like, you know, and given the fact that in our, you know, POC groups, we're already you know, we already sometimes might get stigma from people in our own like sort of community. So then it doesn't really help the fact that the government then gives us further gives, you know, people in the community further stigma, especially like, you know, trans people and people who are gender non-conforming and non-binary people. Doesn't really help the fact that, you know, the government gives them the further stigma and further backlash and further, you know, crap treatment. And then like yeah, and then obviously we're getting, you know, not the best, and obviously they're getting not the best treatment from, you know, people in their own community. And it's just, and the thing is the fact that the government will even persecute, this even goes out to cis women who do not like conform in the traditional you know, standards and of how like a how a cis woman should be in the cishet patriarchal narrative, will also get persecuted, and will also get, you know, massively scrutinized against. There's even been stories that ever since like this trans bathroom bill, and like, you know, ever since these anti-trans bills have been put into legislations, cis women, especially cis women who identify as butch lesbians, they've also been like, you know, they're like heavily persecuted. And I'm just like thinking, girl, like seriously, like the governments are just completely cooked right now with the way how like And yeah, it's just an absolute like just a fuckery at this rate. The fact that, like, you know, we're having people in the community be absolutely discriminated against, and even like obviously like cis women, you know, who are butch lesbians and who do not want to conform in that sort of stereotypical nature and mold of how cis patriarchal society views trans views like gender as a whole. They will just, like, you know, target them too. And the warning is that all of these like sort of anti, you know, trans laws and legislations, they only benefit obviously rich, successful, straight white men. Like, this is the only thing that these laws are benefiting, because they can then dictate, you know, who gets, like, you know, sat on, and who basically gets, like, you know, gotten after. And this law is just what is rich, successful straight white men throughout most of humanity wanting to pretty much enact their power onto the minorities and onto the out group. And that also then pretty much leads me back to colonialism, because colonialism is sort of the root of this all. In terms of the ideology and the mentality behind colonialism, in the sense that in colonialism it's a, you know, group of people, or like in this sense, you know, very rich and, you know, successful people that want to enact their own power over other people. And in this sense, and then that pretty much also goes in line with erasing the identity and the culture that the people that they've come to invade, so the people that they come to invade already had. So yeah, so basically it's just a mess. And you know, we should really obviously learn about, like, obviously history, and the way the impact that history has in regards to how we can link back to what the suffering and oppression that we're pretty much seeing today with trans people and non-binary people, and how that can all be linked back to colonial times and to colonialism. Because in obviously every single area where, you know, the Western world colonized, they pretty much eradicated those trans and non-binary entities that existed, like the Third Spirits in the Americas, like the Hijra group in the South Asian regions, and I'm pretty sure, like, obviously trans and non-binary and gender non-conforming regions in other places, such as, you know, in Aboriginal tribes, or like in the African regions too. So I think it's just very important that we, you know, we obviously be aware of this, and yeah, that when we're aware of, like, the history. Yeah, but anyways, just be aware of the history, guys, so that they don't try and silence us, and that we're always just, like, obviously staying aware and just staying informed of what's going on, and that we can question them when they try to oppress us, or when they try to, like, you know, make us, like, sound crazy or not believable. But anyways, yes, so it's happy to be back, and I'm really happy to obviously be, you know, back on YouTube again, and I will be making more video essays and stuff like that in the future, and I can't wait to obviously spread more video essays about, like, more, like, you know, woke, you know, stuff like this. You know, I think I'm in obviously, like, my woke era, and I want to, like, obviously make more, like, sort of yeah, so quick edit, because I couldn't obviously put this in the video, because my video storage was taking up quite a bit of space. Basically just wanted to say that how I'm glad to be back on YouTube, and how I want to make obviously more and future video essays to go in the future. So yeah, so I hope this finds the algorithm well. Make sure to like, comment and subscribe for, like, any future videos in the future about, and what topics I should discuss next, or what should I tackle next, because, like, I just thought that to do this topic, because obviously it's obviously Pride month this month, and I wanted to obviously discuss something that was similar to Pride. But I am, like, obviously, like, curious to hear, like, what people in the comments would want to know about for future video essays. But yeah, make sure to like, comment and subscribe, and always put the push notifications on, so you're going to be recommended new videos coming through the pipeline. And yeah, just can't wait to be you know, back on YouTube, and can't wait to upload for all you brilliant people out there. So yeah, so take it easy and have a great day, everyone.